Welcome back to our study in the Word. We're looking at Hebrews chapter 11 and the heroes of faith. And Moses is considered one of the greatest of the Old Testament patriarchs. He's an example of being tempted by all the riches of the world, but choosing to follow God no matter the cost. And by faith, Moses' parents saved him by putting him in a basket, a waterproof basket, and putting that in the river. And Pharaoh's daughter found a baby crying. She took pity on him, and she raised Moses as her own son. What an amazing picture of God's protection and provision in Moses' life, this soon-to-be great deliverer of Israel. Here's what Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 and 25 says. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Moses spent the first 40 years of his life as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He was raised like Egyptian royalty. He was trained in all of the best schools of Egypt. He was living in the household of Pharaoh, who was actually the most powerful man in the world at that time. But Moses chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying that short-lived life filled with the pleasures of sin. But it cost him dearly. His choice cost him dearly. But it was a price that Moses was willing to pay. Moses had a choice before him. He could choose the world and all of its corrupt values, with all of the privileges, with all of the comfort, with all of the wealth that he could want for himself. Or he could choose God's way. I'm sure Moses was tempted, just as later on Jesus Christ, the Son of God, would be tempted by Satan in the wilderness and tempted with all the world, with what the world had to offer him as well. And, don't let anyone tell you that sin isn't fun, at least for a while. But Moses was able to see past the short-sighted view of life. He could see past the pleasures that are short-lived. And Moses chose to identify with the enslaved people of Israel, his people. And instead of choosing what would have been a life of sin for him, it would have been a life of sin for Moses to choose that way of life. And we're faced with the same kind of choice. Are we going to sell out to the pressures of the world and its corrupt values? Are we going to choose a life that is easy, a life like all of those who are around us? Or are we going to choose to live life differently? Do we choose to hunger and thirst for God and pursue His righteousness for our lives? To live for God means persecution. It's going to be mocked, being made fun of, because holiness, especially today, is very unpopular. What it all boils down to is this: are we going to make the decision to put our faith in God? Are we going to choose to live for Him? The book of Hebrews was written to Jewish Christians who were tempted to reject their faith in Jesus Christ. They were tempted to turn back to Judaism because they were being severely persecuted and they were suffering greatly. Listen to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 26. He, Moses, considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. Moses considered the reproach of Christ greater than all the treasures of Egypt. What it means to bear the reproach of Christ simply means suffering for His name's sake. And Moses chose to identify with God and God's people rather than living that wealthy, powerful lifestyle. And the writer of Hebrews links the story of Moses' faith to the Hebrew Christians who were suffering so greatly because they had chosen Christ to follow him. They lost all of their worldly possessions because they were running for their lives. And the writer of Hebrews points out that Moses, their hero, he was looking for a greater reward. He was looking for the eternal reward that is found in knowing Christ Jesus. So the writer encourages those suffering Jewish Christians through Moses' example, and that is, don't give up, don't quit. Faith helped Moses look past the approval of others, past material possessions. He could have had all the world had to offer, but he gave it up in order to follow God's call on his life. He was set aside from his infancy for God, and he considered it better to suffer for the sake of God because he was looking for that greater reward. We don't know where our faith will lead us, but we know that our faith can be stronger than all the temptations that come our way, stronger than peer pressure, stronger than the desire for the approval of others. And Moses proves that for us. In 1 John 5:4 it says, "This is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith." Until our next time together, may the Lord richly bless you.